Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking a deeper dive into the Auburn Tigers and talking about some potential players and position groups the Auburn Tigers will be going after as the transfer portal officially has opened on Monday. About 10 days ago, we talked and kind of created a wish list in terms of what positions and potential players Auburn could go after. Now you have a little bit more of a clear picture in terms of who's actually available in the transfer portal, and you're starting to hear some rumors, some noise about who Auburn is going after in the transfer portal as well. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. A shout out to the Auburn fans. This is a program we talked about a couple days ago in terms of a transfer portal wish list. You guys gave me a ton of insight, a ton of feedback. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the boys. Things are changing quickly at Auburn. Hugh Freeze is changing things quickly, and it's been a blast talking about it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, again, would love to get some feedback in the comment section on players you would like to see the Auburn Tigers go after in the transfer portal. And without further ado, I want to get into this one, and I want to focus on a specific position group, and that is the wide receiver position. You take a look back at Auburn and what they did in the transfer portal last year. They tried to address the wide receiver, bringing in guys like Shane Hooks, Jair Shorter, and I think a lot of Auburn fans would say they just missed. Like, a lot of those wide receivers were not very productive at Auburn. And you take a look at the wide receiver numbers in general. Whenever you have a tight end leading your team in receiving yards, that's normally not a good sign for the wide receivers. And that's no knock on Rivaldo Fairweather, who I think is one of the more talented tight ends in the entire country. It's more of a knock on the wide receivers and just not being able to hit those explosive plays downfield. And yes, did Peyton Thorne struggle at times? Absolutely. But the wide receiver play was not at the level you want it to be if you want to compete for an SEC title, win a national championship, all things that Auburn fans have as goals for Hugh Freeze in his tenure at Auburn. Now, taking a look at this wide receiver position, watching back some games, watched a lot of Auburn, and I think my takeaway is there are some slot wide receivers that you feel good about on this Auburn team. Where I think Auburn really fell short is on the boundary, having more of those bigger physical presences, right? Shane Hooks he had a lot of talent, just never really put it together. Now, for Auburn fans, you have two guys in Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson coming in that 2024 class who will be playing early and often for Auburn. But what's the number one thing that you can do in terms of going out in the transfer portal and supplementing a young but talented roster is going out and getting some guys who are experienced, who have performed at the highest level of college football. And that leads us to our first target. That's wide receiver Will Sheppard from Vanderbilt. Has hit the portal yesterday. And this is a guy that I think would be a perfect fit for the Auburn Tigers for a couple different reasons. One, at the SEC level, he's been extremely productive at Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt is not a very good team. Auburn fans, most college football fans know that. But when good things happened, Will Sheppard was normally at the front of that, right? You take a look at the last 2 years, 1,300 yards, 17 total touchdowns in 2 years. Extremely productive, very good in the red zone. All things that Auburn certainly wants in a wide receiver that they're targeting. And again, a boundary presence. There are some really good slot wide receivers that we can talk about a little later. But what I'm looking for Auburn is I want some true wide receiver ones on the outside. And Will Sheppard's a guy that is extremely experienced, extremely talented, and kind of a perfect wide receiver for guys like Cam Coleman and guys like Perry Thompson to come in and kind of shape their game and learn from a guy like Will Sheppard, who's played a lot of football in the SEC. And another takeaway is Auburn, and I'm not saying group of five players, FCS players, can't be productive at the SEC level, but we did see going out and Auburn got a bunch of group of five wide receivers last year, and that jump to the SEC level, it wasn't as clean as Auburn fans would like. So maybe you're kind of adjusting your transfer portal strategy and going out and getting wide receivers who are proven at the SEC level. And Will Sheppard certainly checking that box. And talk about checking the box of proven SEC wide receivers. I'm going to go out to South Carolina and talk about Juice Wells, who hit the portal on Monday as well. Kind of an unexpected one. He announced that he was staying in South Carolina 2 weeks ago. Now he hits the portal after Spencer Rattler has gone to the NFL draft. And I feel like a lot of fans would say, well, Juice Wells, everybody wants Juice Wells. Yeah, everyone wanted Cam Coleman. Everyone wanted Perry Thompson. Hugh Freeze has shown the ability to go out and get top-tier playmakers, whether it's in the transfer portal, whether it's on the high school recruiting trail, and you're looking for a guy who's experienced at the SEC level, I mean, Juice Wells is that guy, and he does so many different things for an offense. Not only can he work vertically down the field, extremely good with the football in his hands, creating separation. If you want to make things easier on a guy like Peyton Thornton or whoever is playing quarterback at Auburn next year, having a guy like Juice Wells who you can just get the football to, who's creating separation early in his route trees and is going to create after the catch, makes that quarterback position a hell of a lot easier. Juice Wells, 8 months ago, when we were talking and previewing what the SEC is going to look like, I said Juice Wells might be the best receiver in the SEC. And obviously, we spent most of the 2023 season banged up. My opinion on Juice Wells in terms of what he can be as an SEC wide receiver has certainly not changed. I think he's one of the more talented receivers in the SEC and a massive target for the Auburn Tigers. Next guy I want to go to, and kind of sticking with that that true wide receiver boundary kind of guy, and maybe some fans not as familiar with this name because he's not in the SEC, but he's a guy that's done it at the Power 5 level. That is Donovan McCloud. As a Big Ten guy myself, very experienced with Donovan McCloud, and quite frankly, one of the more slept-on wide receivers in this transfer portal class. Not a lot of buzz around his name. Very interesting story. Came in that 2021 class as a quarterback, did not play much as a freshman, and they looked at him and said, you were too athletic to just sit the bench. So they tossed him out at wide receiver. And then in the 2022 season, I mean, he was getting his feet wet at the wide receiver position, right? Played quarterback his whole life, 16 catches, $169, 1 touchdown. In 2023, the full transition to wide receiver, Donovan McCloud, was different. I mean, 48 catches, 644 yards, 6 touchdowns in an Indiana offense that flat out stunk. And so you're looking at a guy like Donovan McCloud, you're looking for a physical wide receiver who can make things happen on the boundary. Talking about making it easy on the quarterback, Donovan McCloud turns 50-50 balls to 70-30. 6'5", 200 pounds, extremely imposing frame. And what excites me the most is he's going into his 3rd year of playing the wide receiver position. Like, this guy just caught for 644 yards, more than any wide receiver on Auburn's roster caught for last year, and was only his first full year playing the wide receiver spot. I mean, what would it look like with another year of development for Donovan McCloud? Again, Auburn Tiger fans probably not as familiar with that name in comparison to Will Shepherd or Juice Wells, but a guy that I think would be a really nice fit for the Auburn Tigers at that wide receiver position. Now, the next name, if you follow the high school recruiting trail, you definitely recognize this one, Julian Fleming, going back to the Big Ten, former top 5 national recruit coming out of that 2020 class. And a lot of times when you get a wide receiver like Julian Fleming, there's 2 different things. One is he maybe just wasn't as good as his high school ranking. And although that might be true, maybe he wasn't the top 5 national prospect in the class, this guy can still play and just had a tough career at Ohio State. 1, injuries. 2, that wide receiver room, I mean, absolutely loaded. Came in the same class with Jackson Smith-Njigba, kind of got phased out. Then you have Marvin Harrison Jr., never really got the opportunity to be a true wide receiver 1 in an offense. You look at the frame, 6'2", 210 pounds, the size, the speed, the athleticism, the physical frame. There was a reason Julian Fleming was a top 5 national prospect coming out of high school. He can still play. And I just think he needs more of an opportunity to be that wide receiver in an offense. This is one of those guys that, yeah, you're taking a little bit of a risk because he's only caught for 963 yards throughout 4 years. Not insanely productive. But one of those things with the high upside being absolutely insane. And not only a couple of years ago, you had Jamison Williams transfer from Ohio State because he couldn't get playing time. He transfers to Alabama, and he absolutely explodes. Maybe you're getting a similar kind of story or a career story from Julian Fleming, who is a guy that just didn't really struggle to get the opportunity at Ohio State, but has all the physical ability in the world. Julian Fleming would be a really interesting guy to target. Now, a couple other wide receivers that I've seen mentioned with Auburn. You have Deion Burks from Purdue, a guy that, again, one of the most talented wide receivers in the transfer portal. Have talked about him in links to a lot of different programs. More of a slot wide receiver. And the reason I'm not necessarily, I mean, if Deion Burks goes to Auburn, that's massive. Don't get me wrong. That being said, Auburn has some guys that you feel comfortable on the inside. What I'm looking for is kind of some true X wide receivers that can produce on the boundary, because quite frankly, you look at the roster in terms of the bigger framed receivers who are playing the outside. That's where Auburn, I think, needs some talent injected. You missed with Jair Shorty. You missed with Shane Hooks. See if one of these guys, whether it's Will Shippard, whether it's Donovan McCloud, whether it's Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, or maybe even Ryan Williams, you have a lot of guys who are young coming in on that boundary. Another guy that I've seen thrown around, Cullen Lacey from South Alabama. This one would make a lot of sense too, but again, more of a slot wide receiver. Deion Burks, Lacey, guys that I think would be phenomenal fits for Auburn. I'm just still focused a little bit more on those bigger wide receivers that can play out on the boundary, help stretch the field vertically a little bit more. Now, the last guy I want to talk about, kind of going away from the wide receiver room, you'll see Auburn go after all sorts of players at all different positions. I kind of wanted to take a deeper dive into some of these wide receivers. Is a guy at Will Lee from Kansas State who picked up an offer from Auburn. You're losing a lot of veteran guys at the cornerback position. Will Lee probably would have been a draft pick. I truly think, from a trait standpoint, Will Lee checks a lot of boxes that you want in an NFL quarterback. Phenomenal length, phenomenal ball skills, really fluid athlete. I think this guy is kind of a sleeper for an all SEC caliber season if he winds up at Auburn. And again, you look at Auburn in their depth chart, they're going to lose some guys, some key guys, some veteran guys in that secondary. Will Lee from Kansas State, probably my favorite cornerback available right now in the transfer portal. Auburn's already reached out. That one would make a lot of sense too. Now, the next couple weeks for Auburn fans, it's going to be busy. I'm going to be trying to do as much as I can in terms of roster moves for the Auburn Tigers. Auburn fans, you guys have shown just a ton of support. Cannot thank you guys enough. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.